Hi again. So, this is part two of chapter four. We talked about the aspects of culture, the four aspects of culture as defined by Edward Hall, cultural anthropologist. We said that power distance is the first dimension, referring to inequality between less powerful and more powerful people. The uncertainty avoidance aspect is the amount of stress that a culture associates with an unknown future, and that a group that includes individuals with different levels of uncertainty avoidance may encounter problems while planning and managing their time. So I suggest that you read the chapter more thoroughly for a better understanding of this. And I brought you an example of how some cultures have a problem with planning the future because futures are never certain and it's considered bad luck to plan for the future because it would be presumptuous to say that I know I'm going to be okay 7 years from now. I see myself doing this and that. Well, you never know if you're going to survive. So, the third aspect, the third dimension of culture is individualism versus collectivism. We also know societies that are communitarian or egalitarian, communitarian societies, and um, that really stress the community, the collective aspect, the collective dimension of society. So, culturally, individualism versus collectivism is what differentiates whether attention is focused on the individual or the group. And the fourth one, time orientation, it defines how quickly a culture assumes important aspects of life should occur. For example, having children. In many cultures, having children occurs sooner. If a person is not married or not becoming a parent by a certain age, everybody feels free to ask questions, to interfere, to be rude even, to call them names like why don't you have any children? Are you are you dumb? But in other cultures, really, it is an offensive thing to ask about children or marriage. People allow each other space to decide on their own when they want to have children. So it is just one example of the timelines of individuals, what is appropriate, what is not. And it's not just the natural life cycle, but careers, relationships. For instance, in the Japanese culture, it is very highly respected that an older person should be at the top of the hierarchy, should have a leading position in society, in companies. The older, the better. In other cultures, in other societies, um, age should not be brought up at all. We, for example, we cannot talk about age. And so, again, read more about this in your chapter. We'll move on to demographic diversity. That, includes a person's age, gender, sex, um, years in college, years of employment, all these things that you can put in a census box. So the first one that comes to mind is sex and gender. Um, those are expressed in small groups through ways members communicate with one another. But the biological sex is one thing, the gender is more perceived, we know, and I'm not going to talk too much about gender and sex because those things are well covered in other courses and other units of courses. So it's just enough to say that gender, the perceived form that associates with sex, sexuality, gender can lean towards masculinity or femininity. And when I read in our chapter that there are predictors that usually, such and such gender would be more feminine, the way they communicate would be more masculine. Men like to make decisions, women like to follow. I think that things are changing a little bit, and it's all a mix now. You can't really be sure, and you cannot stereotype gender and sex. So I would say that none of these notions is an absolute. We know that gender is a spectrum, and qualities of communication, ways of communication could be relative, even overlapping between genders. So the last part is cognitive diversity, and that is the learning style of a person. Cognitive means how we know things. Learning styles are the individual's preferences for acquiring information in a learning environment, and those preferences influence how individuals listen to or present information, all of which is important how a small group communicates. So there are 4 types of learners. You will probably know a little more about this if you are studying education or child development. You know that there are different learning styles. For example, I would say that my preferred learning style is listening because I'm not a very visually developed learner. Although I do have a memory of the page that I see. I can acquire memories through looking. But my learning style is leaning towards hearing rather than seeing, because my sense of design and graphical imagination it's not very well developed. My hearing is better developed. So I would be a learner who prefers audio rather than video. And sometimes I find video distracting, like when I try to learn a different language, foreign language. If I see pictures, I will remember the pictures, but not the words that match those pictures. Whereas if I close my eyes and just listen to the audio, it will be stuck in my mind as audio. So there are 4 types, as I said. A converger, it would be an individual who learns through a combination of thinking and doing, and those people participate in group work accordingly, thinking and doing work. A diverger is a person who learns through a combination of watching and feeling. A simulator is a person who learns through a combination of thinking and watching. And an accommodator learns through a combination of feeling and doing. So I would suggest that you read those, the detailed descriptions of those different learner styles, because that would have an influence on how people communicate in a small group. And it's important to have different learners, different learning styles represented in a small group so that an innovative task can be accomplished better. So also we should remember that communicative traits of group members are based on their cultural and demographic identities. Cultural and demographic diversity is reflected in the ways people communicate. So on page 83 of our textbook, there are some examples of learners from different cultures. And in this example, the cultural differences are matched with communicative styles, communicative traits. So as you see, everything sort of overlaps. You know, the way people communicate is related to the way people learn, and vice versa. So now this was the essence of the chapter, and I have already posted it on Blackboard. You will have this available to read. On the side, we're working on our group projects. We will be looking for ways of communicating back. I would like to know if Blackboard allows you to communicate back with me. If not, just email me. And I would like to know if you can see the group members who are participating in your work. So as soon as you're ready, we will continue with the actual hands-on project. Okay, I will talk to you next time with chapter 5. Until then, have a nice day.